about. So I just wanted to really give a background about what the Blackout Live from New York is and what we're going to be doing and a little bit about me. So the Blackout is all about Black folks and our magic and how we make things happen. We're going to be exploring how we reimagine our place in entrepreneurship. How do we reimagine getting places and seats at different tables, and what really it takes to move forward as a Black entrepreneur globally? I don't want to just focus on entrepreneurship here in the States. So when you guys have comments or questions, feel free to drop it and I'll bring you up so we can have further discussion. So first, I wanted to just give a little background about who I am as your host, Tasemere. I am a native New Yorker, currently based out of Bronx, New York, but I'm from Brooklyn, New York. If you guys have any idea where that is, it's really the next place where Black folks go to live and flourish outside of Harlem. I'm from East New York, Brooklyn. I grew up there my entire life before I relocated to the Bronx, which is maybe about an hour and a half away from Brooklyn, New York. I've been living here for about 7 years. And so my background is that I have a bachelor's in history from SUNY Oswego, a master's in urban studies from Long Island University, the Brooklyn campus, and I've worked in economic development for about 10 years. In 2016, I had the idea to start my own business. I actually went into the entire incorporation phase in 2017, and then I quit my job in 2019. And I've been working with Black entrepreneurs since its conception. Good morning, Rico. How are you? And so I wanted to pose a couple of questions here. Good morning, Brenda. I wanted to pose a couple of questions. How can Black creatives continue to reimagine entrepreneurship? I read an article that I'm going to share here on the screen, and I would really like you all's feedback on it because it was talking about economic development, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So I'm going to just pull up my screen here. I hope that you guys can see it. It was really about TikTok, right? And how TikTok in some ways are exploiting Black creatives. And we know that Black folks on TikTok, they create different dances, they create different challenges, and that can also be part of their content that they are using on their different platforms like Instagram, YouTube. Maybe they're using TikTok in general. Maybe it's going into a feed that they have. This is their professional, how they're building their audience. And Black folks decided to basically call TikTok out and refuse to choreograph dances because they felt like other folks weren't really doing the dances properly. Now, my question here is, why do we continue to be on platforms and build tables that aren't our tables? That's my question that I have. Wanted to get some feedback from you guys about it. When I read it, that was the first thing that I thought about, oh my gosh, here we go again. We already heard all the stories about TikTok before it was a popular platform to be on. We know that it's based out of China. We know that they do a lot of data mining. And if you aren't familiar about what data mining is, that's when platforms basically sell the data of their users for a profit, right? So you are on their platforms, you're building your audience, you're sending out messages, and they're basically scrubbing all of that information and packaging it up to either repurpose it for marketing directly to you and or to sell it to other folks. And so my question was, we know that China, has no rules around how they use data, and then we are on their platforms making it more and more popular. Why haven't we created a TikTok? Or why haven't we created a platform similar to a TikTok? and then we can use that and monetize it for our own purposes. And instead, we decide to get really angry because we aren't at the table in the way that we thought we wanted to be, and now we're upset about it. I'm kind of interested in hearing from you guys around your thoughts about it. And just what do you have to say? Anyone have anything to say about TikTok and its use of data and how Black folks are using the platform? Okay, I guess not right now. But if that's the case, we'll just keep talking about it. I'll give some more of my opinions. I was in a forum where someone brought up months ago around how she felt that Black folks could start really engaging with tech in a way of building our own tech platforms and social media platforms that we can use. And her thought process behind it was, we're making billions of dollars for Facebooks and Instagrams and the YouTubes of the world. And we're basically putting our content out there and we don't really own it. We don't have any rights to it. And wouldn't it be great if we could come together with all of our magic that we have and we could create our own platforms to do essentially what we are already doing on other platforms. And I thought that was like a really not new way to think about technology, but a new way to explore how we can begin to really make waves for ourselves outside of being coders and developers and back end folks. But how could we really change, the dynamics of the conversation? Earlier today, I also had a conversation with my mom about why are more Black folks becoming entrepreneurs, and she was asking me my thoughts about it. And my thoughts are really simple. I feel like because we have relied so much on going to work at someone else's job. We have overly relied on that being our source of sustainability. We now see with COVID that nothing is guaranteed, right? Like, you can go to work, you can be on someone's job for 40 years, you can be on someone's job for 25 years, and you can still be furloughed, right? And still have to think about, how do you survive? How do you pay your bills? How do you pay your mortgage, your rent, your utilities? How do you buy food? If you have children, how do you provide for them? And now we're starting to think about, how do we become more self-sufficient, and what tools or what experience do we have that we can package in a way to make some money, right? And I think that Black folks have woke up and decided, like, I don't want to continue to be at these tables or fight for the chance to be at the tables and then the rules change. My perfect example from my personal experience is when I was growing up, which some of you might be like, you still look like a really young person. I am young, I'm in my mid-30s, but when I was growing up, the one thing that I knew that people were talking about, go to school and be an attorney, right? Go to school and be a doctor. Those were like the professions that your parents wanted you to do. And now looking back, a lot of people have gone to school and they have pursued these careers, and now these industries are oversaturated. How many of us know how many young folks go off to law school, they have hundreds of $1,000s in debt, and then they can't really find a job, right? Or they, thank you, Brenda, for that. Or we have doctors that are like, hey, I've been following this dream to becoming a doctor, and now I've decided that I don't really think that that's where I want to be, right? And so now we have to keep thinking about, where do we go? What do we do? How many degrees do you go back to school and try to get? The newest thing is everyone is trying to become a doctorate of something. So now we have so many PhD folks, which is amazing. Like, kudos to you for being able to stick through that process. But when I think about how many universities there are and how many departments there are and how hard it is to get tenure, I'm concerned about my Black folks finding permanent jobs at universities. So my whole idea is that the game continues to change, right? Like, if we are trying to continue to go down this road of building tables for other folks that we don't get a chance to sit at, we're always going to be hustling backwards, right? Like, what's going to happen now when the economists are saying the jobs are no longer in the legal field? They are in medicine, but nurses, right? They're looking for people to become nurses, not necessarily doctors, but they're also saying that they're looking for people to be plumbers and electricians and carpenters. And those are things that are no longer offered in school anymore. You know, there's very few vocational training programs in school that are really building these kinds of job security and workforce, or whatever you want to call it, because it was deemed that those jobs were no longer necessary, and now everybody was going to be a professional. And now those exact same jobs that were deemed, you know, undesirable or is where the money is. The next thing that I have questions about is tech. You know, tech is the newest thing on the block. Everybody wants to become a coder. They want to do STEM. They want to do back-end development, but also I have questions around that, you know, like, how long is that going to last and how sustainable is that? Is everyone going to start becoming coders and working for small startups and building apps? How many apps can we have, right? How many apps do we create? When is creating apps going to be obsolete and then it turns into something else? And how do we continue to just reinvent ourselves and reinvent the wheel of what we're doing for our own self? I was a part of a group called BBEC that talked a lot of Black economics and how do we start circulating the dollar in ways that make sense outside of saying Black folks don't circulate the dollar, you know, compared to other cultures where the dollar stays in their community much longer. And, you know, they're able to really build their infrastructure and their schools and their culture because they're all, you know, holding on to the money within their community. And our dollar, like, leaves probably as soon as it gets in our pocket, right? How do we do that? And the thought was around having a pipeline, not just saying buy Black, but buy Black in a pipeline, right? So, like, if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm going to look for other professional to do work with me, right? So, like, I'm not doing PR. I'm not a publicist. So maybe I look for a publicist and I look specifically for a Black publicist. And then that Black publicist is also looking for Black clients. So however that Black publicist is building their pipeline. Another example can be in manufacturing and when you get loans, right? Like, so really trying to figure out how are you sourcing your materials as much as you can from other Black professionals across the diaspora, right? Because you don't necessarily have to stay here in the States. And I think that that is also another thing that we usually think about as Americans. We're very much like, I'm going to stay in America and I'm really not going to travel abroad. And then if we do travel abroad, the first place that we go is to a European country, right? I'm also a victim of that. But in trying to change the mindset of like, why isn't Africa an appealing place to go to as your first trip abroad, right? And why aren't we spending money there? And why aren't we just circulating dollars in that kind of way and thinking about how we really try to close the pipeline? So I wonder if Rico or Brenda has any thoughts around what I have shared so far. Maybe it's about TikTok, maybe it's about Black economics, maybe it's about workforce development. Really interested in seeing what people have questions about. Have you guys been thinking about this? Thank you, Brenda. I stay up late thinking about these types of critical thinking questions that really help me design how I want to interact and what kind of conversations would I like to have, instead of having the same tired old conversation around, I'm being excluded. I'm okay with being excluded. Being excluded allows me to create platforms where I'm going to include myself. Because why would I create a platform where I'm not included in? And really thinking about the history that goes into why I might want to or not want to work with a particular group or a particular person, because of what they stand for, and really trying to change my attitude around, just accepting certain things. So, I wanted to just give a plug really quickly before I forget. I know we're like 16 minutes in to Be More News. Donnie Glover has definitely been one of my champions of pushing me to become more public. We talk about a lot of these topics in our conversations around intergenerational mixes, around how can the older generation give information to the younger generation, so we aren't always starting over from scratch, but we also are speaking from a place of knowledge, right? Because that's also a struggle that I think that we have when we are saying, like, I don't understand why this is happening, but we forget that the elders have a lot of lived experience. They might not have as much professional education experience, in a way of they went to school and got all these pieces of paper that I call condos sitting on the wall, which I have about a small condo on my wall. But there's a lot of learning that we can take from our elders to incorporate how we decide to move forward, or how we don't, right? And I don't think that entrepreneurship is necessarily for everyone. Some people are a little risk averse, right? They're like, I don't want to be an entrepreneur. That is like too much stress for me to have to think about how I'm going to find these clients. I need to have a little bit of a guarantee around what kind of income I'm going to be bringing in, because I have bills to pay, I have a family to take care of. And I totally understand that. I was once that person that was really thinking I was just going to work for someone, right? Like, I was totally cool with that. I was like, I'm going to work for someone, I'm going to retire, and maybe when I retire, I'll have new ideas about what I wanted to do. But what happened with me personally is that I started finding that I was having a hard time with the politics of working on a job. Not to say that there aren't politics in business. There's probably even more politics in business than in working for someone else. But I was really pigeonholed on what I can say. I was constantly being told, you can't say that. You can think that, but that's not something that you should share with other folks, right? That looks bad for our business. And then I was also starting to struggle with just personal decisions of, if I give my whole life and my talents to this job, then what would I ultimately be left with if this job no longer wanted me to be there? And it really had me to think about entrepreneurship outside of being a hobby, because at that point I was thinking about being an entrepreneur as a hobbyist. Like, this is just something that I just do for fun, instead of really turning it up and saying like, oh, this is something that can pay my bills, right? And so when I started thinking about it from that perspective, I really started thinking about, Black economics, what we have talked about how do I participate in my own sustainability? How do I participate or choose not to participate in certain circles or at certain tables? If I'm going to build my own platform, how do I choose who I would like to build with? What kind of morality or ethical practices would I like them to be? Because don't get it twisted. All Black folks are not kin folks. We hear that all the time, right? So like now I really have the will to really say, like, I don't really want to work with this person because maybe their perspectives aren't in line with my values. Whereas if I was working for someone else, what I thought probably wouldn't matter as much, because I would have to think about what was in the best interest of that organization. And to truth be told, I really worked a lot with Black folks, and I found out that, you know, sometimes even people that look like you, that you may think that they have similar experiences, they have similar viewpoints that you have, might be the ones that literally are like holding you back from being your best self. And sometimes your supporters come from other groups, come from other cultures, come from other places around the world, because maybe they have a different experience and viewpoint than you have and what you've been going through, but they really see value in what you offer. And so that's what I want to explore here with the Blackout Live from New York. I don't want it to be focused and centered mainly from New York. As I'm moving around, there might be times where I might not be stationary and you might get to see some of the background of New York, but I definitely want to explore these kind of topics because I think that this will help us all get to a greater understanding of what we want to do or what do we choose not to do, outside of someone saying, you know, these blanket comments like all Black people should be doing this or Black folks aren't doing that. Well, sometimes you're not doing something because you don't agree, right? And it's okay not to agree. Sometimes you aren't doing something because you don't have the means to do it. You know, or you don't have the time. Like sometimes I'm guilty of going on Amazon to just buy something really quickly because, you know, I'm like, hey, I need to go on Amazon to buy this thing. And I don't always make sure that I buy from a Black business, you know, even though I might want to. Sometimes time crunches in and it's like an urgency, and I don't know a person or entity that sells what I need exactly at that time that I need it, that I might just grab something. So even though I'm all about Black economics, you know, I have places where I can shore up finding these Black businesses. And then the question becomes, you know, I've asked people this and they haven't had answers for me, but what happens when, you know, people say buy Black, and is there blackface in business, right? Is it that the person that you're buying from looks like you, so you think that they're selling or making the product, but they actually are just a facilitator of a non-Black product, right? Like, so even though I want to buy Black, how much investigation do I really have to do to make sure that I'm actually buying a Black product, right? Because there's so many people that are like, hey, I just bought these things. They looked really cute. They had a lot of different prints and fabrics that I really liked. And maybe they bought them from Italy, but maybe they're in a Black shop and I'm buying them from a Black person who made a hat. And I think that I'm buying Black, but her pipeline or his pipeline really isn't Black. So I get a little, I go down these little rabbit holes, which might pigeonhole me sometimes, but I would love to hear some feedback from some folks. Brenda, if you want to join us, I'm going to invite you to come up. You've been so active in the comments that I am going to invite you to come up if I can figure out how to do this, because this is literally my first time here on StreamYard. So I am going to figure out how I can do it. But in the meantime, in between time, if I can't, I will just keep publicizing comments here. Hey Lee, thanks so much. So with the HBCUs, I have other questions around around that, because I did have an opportunity to go to an HBCU, but I kind of felt like I wanted to go because I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be around all my people, right? And how great is that, to just be able to be around people that look like me. And I was thinking like, oh, this would be like such camaraderie. But then I ultimately decided not to go to a HBCU, mainly because that financial aid package that I got from that SUNY school was popping, and I was like, I need to go where the money is at. But then I also learned that while I was there, we had a pretty decent population of Black students on campus. And what I kept thinking was like, I wanted to reach out, but I kept feeling like in the whole Blackness, there was still like a stereotype that, okay, if you're from New York, you're like this. And I was kind of trying to figure out exactly who I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And so sometimes I felt like maybe I might have missed out on that opportunity with the HBCUs, to really dig into culture and experience sororities and fraternities. I didn't really have that on my campus because those groups weren't presented there. They were a little bit further away. So I only had it when I went off campus. But I felt like at the same time, I was a little conflicted because I was like, if I'm going to graduate and have to work with all these white people, don't I need to learn how to like communicate with them now? And I don't really know if I made the best decision for undergrad. For myself, I felt like I got a lot of support from my advisor that really went, and I still talk to her now, that really went out of her way to really show me the ropes. And really help me decide my classes. I'm sure I probably would have had a similar experience like that if I went to a HBCU. Would love to hear other people's experiences if you did go to a HBCU. But I also think that the social aspect of college probably would have been like tremendous for me. I probably would have met and learned about so many different types of communities that Black folks come from. Coming from New York, I have the privilege of meeting people from all over the world, and interacting with folks from Africa, from South America, from different states in the US, and getting their different experiences, because what I experience in New York is very different from what people might experience in the Midwest, what people might experience down south, what people might experience on the West Coast. And so I know that I have a different type of experience because I'm introduced and have access, not that I can always afford it, but have access to experience different cultures in a different kind of way. Brenda, I'm just going to put your comment up here one more time because I felt like I have had this last experience. I always had a strong desire to be my own boss and work out of my own. I feel like I've had that desire before I even knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I'll go back to a conversation that I was having earlier this morning with my mom around, comments that I have gotten from previous employers that I felt really pushed this whole Black agenda. I felt like my Black agenda was always there, but sometimes I felt like I had to compromise it. Like, how am I going to do my hair? As you guys could see today, my hair is green and I love it. But if I was working in a traditional setting, this right here would not be acceptable no matter how I decided to style it. Someone would say, like, I can't believe she came to this job with this green hair. As we are seeing with the track star and her orange hair, that a lot of people have a lot of comments around that as well. But for me, working from home is like such a privilege that I never really, thought existed before. I get to balance, when I want to get up, when I want to go to work. when I have to do things around the house, when I have to do errands for myself. Working from home is a really different experience. And I think we all have gotten that experience during COVID. So maybe that has changed the way workforce is going to be moving in the future. I wonder how Black folks are feeling about working from home. Do they feel like they want to? In some industries, maybe this is going to be the new thing because childcare is really expensive, so maybe this might help with household economics of being able to balance. But in some instances, it doesn't, because, when you have toddlers running around or they're being very distractive, maybe you need them to be out of the house so that way you can function and get certain things done. Also wondering how that is impacting dads, especially Black dads. Dads usually get a bad rap here. But I think that maybe during COVID, some Black dads have actually been able to father differently than they would have before, because now they don't have to always leave the house. So now they're also at home and they're being able to have those moments with their kids that maybe they might have missed had they been on a traditional 9 to 5. And maybe that might also change for some Black dads. Maybe Black dads might want to also decide to work from home. That would be a really interesting topic. I'm going to jot that down since that came up here, and see if I can get some Black dads to talk about fathering during COVID, because I would love to explore that topic and economics and what has come out of that entire thing. That seems like it would be great. It does take a lot of, Brenda, you are completely right. It does take a lot of discipline and focus to work from home. But I think that this is objective, because I think that some people are night people. I'm not a night person. I'm like totally up in the morning. I love being up at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock. I do my best work in the morning. But I know some creatives that are saying like they work at night. They're like night owls. Maybe they get their focus better at night. I don't know how, because after about 10 o'clock, I'm done. I'm ready to go to bed. But I do think that it allows people to structure their day that best works for them when they're able to work from home and when they have the flexibility to do so. I'm interested to see how many different new protocols and procedures are going to be in place post-COVID. I'm also interested to see how we decide to show up. Now that we, meaning Black folks, have been able to experience this sense of independence, since most of us have been able to work from home, depending on our industry that we work in. But even if you've had to work during COVID, you also have had some sort of empowerment. I'll go to educators, for example. Some educators were like, yo, I'm not showing up back at work, because unless there's some strong COVID procedures in place, I'm not showing up on this job for nobody. I think that was empowering. I was over here being their champion in the background, really like, I want to see what this is going to do. How is this going to force your employer to take you seriously? Just that whole notion of, if all the folks on your job decided to walk off because they don't feel safe, what does that mean for the end employer? And I was also interested to hear how Black folks was speaking up and taking their space and taking their time back. To quote, I think she is a House Representative, but to say, let's really think about how do we take ownership of ourselves? How do we take ownership of what is important to us and our health? How do we take ownership of just our everyday being? Was really phenomenal to see, and I'm interested to see how we are going to implement that going forward. Are we going to go back to being kind of in the background, having these thoughts and maybe only sharing them with a couple of people? Are we going to be fearful? Because I mean, if we're still all here after COVID, one, we have faith in a higher being. I'm a Christian, so I have faith in God. But I know that some people have different religion practices, and I'm totally okay with that. But we have to have faith in something, someone outside of ourselves, that we have been able to survive, because a lot of folks haven't. And then what are we going to do on the other end? There's lots of discussion around going back to normal, but what is normal? What is normal in society? And then what is going to be the new normal for Black folks? I'm really interested in just thinking about that. Like, are we going to continue to create and innovate? I mean, Black entrepreneurship is up a lot. I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but Black women have been killing it during COVID becoming entrepreneurs. And not to leave our Black men out either. They are also thinking about what can they do, how can they become investors in businesses, how can they make their money work for them a little bit better, how can they be better. I think across the board, we all have been thinking about creating generational wealth outside of whatever our notions might have been before. So I am really interested in seeing how COVID is going to impact our community after we get to the other end, even if there is another end. To the point of tech, I wanted to share this group that I have been following, and I've gone to some of their master classes, which are free. They're based out in Canada, and I feel like now during COVID, I have been exploring more and more outside of the US, which again, I would say I probably didn't do that before, but here it is. This is called the Black Professionals in Tech Network. They have a Slack channel, which I am a part of, so I will pull up the Slack channel here. And this is basically a channel where people from across the world are like putting up different announcements here. They put up different job posts. They put up different tips that they have when working in tech. They connect people to lots of other folks in tech or outside of tech. I have found this community to be amazing. If anybody is interested in getting into tech, I would definitely say BPTN is the place to be. And if you are unfamiliar with Slack is basically, think of it like a really large messenger on Facebook or a really large text group. And so basically all these people can sign up from wherever you are around the world. You get greeted with like, hey, put in a greeting message, introduce yourself. You introduce yourself, people kind of interact with you, but then they have these different channels, which are just different groupings of topics, right? So like some people might post up announcements. Like I saw something the other day that was announcing, if there were any young folks that were interested in getting into tech, this particular entity was looking for interns. They also usually post a lot of job listings in the tech field there, and then you have like a personal contact person to connect with. There's lots of Black folks entering tech, to my point earlier in this conversation, wondering when are we going to start creating our own tech platform, since there's a lot of Black people doing a lot of coding and a lot of back-end development, meaning that they're building the back ends of these infrastructures to work. There's a lot of front-end developers, meaning that what we see on the screen is built intentionally, and there's people that are doing that as well. People are taking it to market. I feel like we have the entire pipeline to build our own Black tech hubs and centers and infrastructures and apps and all this other stuff. I am not an app developer. I do not have a background in tech or anything like that. So I wouldn't be the person to really go in and infiltrate this industry. I'm doing what I can do in business development, but really interested to see how this is taking place. So just wanted to reset really quickly before we run out of time. I'm Tasemere, your host of the Blackout Live from New York. This is a segment that is designed to explore everything that is Black around Black economics. Right now, today, we are talking about Black entrepreneurship. Really interested in hearing what folks have to say around Black entrepreneurship. How do we show up? How do we start to reimagine how we show up in different entrepreneurial circles, different entrepreneurial infrastructures and ecosystems. And we talked about TikTok and how Black creatives were out here being upset that they were creating these dances on TikTok and people weren't doing them properly. So they decided that they were no longer going to put up dances on TikTok as TikTok challenges. And this is the article. If anyone is interested, I will share it again here. This was the article that I was referring to. And I was also kind of like, why are we mad, right? We continue to do the same thing on other people's platforms, which I'm saying are their tables, and then we are upset that we are not included at the table. So all these Black creators decided that they were going to stay off the app. They weren't going to do any new dances. They weren't going to give any more content to this app because people were not engaging with the app and the dances the way that they wanted them to. And my question is, when are we going to create our own TikTok? I mean, we have the people, we have the content, we know that we create culture all day, every day, right? Culture trends really follow us, right? So when are we going to say, you know what, enough is enough with this whole TikTok platform? We're going to go out, we're going to create our own. That's a challenge that I have to the Black tech professionals, because that's something that I cannot do. And then I also shared about Black professionals in tech, their platform, that I also subscribe to their Slack channel. This is not a paid advertisement. This is just me sharing information around what is really going on in both of these kind of industries that have some synergy together. Again, I'm Tasemere, based out of New York, looking to explore these different types of topics. And we covered a couple of things today, but I talked about that really got me going, that I'm really going to work on for an upcoming segment, is going to be Black dads and fatherhood during COVID. What has their experience been? What do they like about it? What have they learned since being at home with their kids? Has that changed their perspective around fathering? Do they want to stay at home a little bit more? Just what would they like to do? Oh, thank you so much, Brenda. I hope that you will come back. I hope all my viewers will come back. Next week, I'll be here Saturdays at 10 to 11, just continuing to explore different topics, different trends that might come during the week, or things that have come up in the past that we really haven't paid a lot of attention to, but trying to explore not just topic, but how it relates to Black folks, because I'm all about trying to stay Black focused and Black centered. I want to know how this impacts me and my people first, and then I'll get to everybody else afterwards. But in my experience, I feel like when I try to be so inclusive from the beginning, I tend to exclude my own needs, right? So like if I'm trying to be inclusive and think about everybody else and how everybody else feels about an X topic and an X industry, then I get lost in the sauce, because then it becomes a minority conversation, which means that I'm no longer included at the table that I am trying to build. So definitely trying to stay Black focused and Black centered for these conversations and personal conversations that I have. Do you guys have any topics, things that you would like to pose? I have not figured out how to bring people up here live, but that is something that I would definitely try to figure out for upcoming segments, so we can have a more interactive conversation, so we can really just dig into these topics and these issues, because they're really thought-provoking, and I feel like these are conversations that we are having at our kitchen tables, or however we are meeting people. I think we mainly meet over food, but I could be wrong, but however we are deciding to meet with people, I think that these are some of the things that we're talking about, but not necessarily on mainstream platforms and group settings. And so I would really like to start, bringing those really intriguing conversations to the table and really dissecting, how does this impact us, and how do we think about it, and how do we start to be very intentional about our word choices and get away from trying to be so inclusive? Mainly because I have seen, sitting in the background as a historian of sorts, that other folks don't have a problem excluding us, right? And we are totally okay with not being included. Other groups have no issue excluding us from their legislations, from how they do business, how they're going to continue to grow, and they're very focused on their group of people. However, when we talk, we feel like we have to include everybody under the sun, and just starting to understand, why do we do that? And when are we going to take ownership that I can take up this space, I can totally be Black centered and Black focused and not feel bad about it, right? Because I'm not always included in other people's discussions and conversations. I can guarantee you that Asian people are not including me in their discussions around how they're going to develop different types of Chinatowns. I am not mad about it. I'm not mad about that. I need to go figure out where my Black Wall Streets are and how I'm going to participate in the Black Wall Streets, as Sidani Glover's point and mission that we have talked about is learning about different Black Wall Streets. And there were many of them, right? And how are we going to rebuild that infrastructure and that Black excellence and participate in that? Why would I go shop at a Chinatown when I can go buy something from a Black Wall Street? What kind of mind shift do I have to do to start getting into that pocket of thought and of action and of attention? Not to say that there's anything wrong with Chinatown. I love my Asian people. My sister-in-law is Asian, but I know for sure that she definitely makes sure that she goes to the places where her culture is represented, and I'm going everywhere sometime except for where my culture is represented. So I need to think about that, and I think that me times 1 million plus people, we got a big problem here, right? So we really need to start delving into these questions and issues in a more constructive way, pointing the finger in a comparison way, right? Because I know that I'm not going to compare myself to X and X group. I need to just focus on what I'm going to do and how I'm going to try to influence those that are closest to me and moving in better directions, and not being an authoritative figure of saying, you must do this, because I already know if I come from that perspective, they're going to walk right out the door. And so just wanting to really start digging into these topics of what we are doing here in America, since we're based here, or I'm based here, but I'm also interested in exploring Black folks all over the world, because we're everywhere, right? Where there is almost no place where we aren't. I'm sure there is one Black person or Black entity out in Antarctica or have been in the past, right? So I think we have been across the globe. I think that if we start thinking about Blackness as a diaspora, we will be better suited to tackle some of these questions that come up, even though we're here in this country. And so just as an aside, I decided to launch the Blackout Live from New York as a rebellion against the 4th of July. So I decided to do it as close to the 4th of July as possible, mainly because we all know by now that our Black experience when America was fighting for its independence did not include us being independent. And so not necessarily saying I'm going to X out the holiday and replace it with something else, but trying to really define how do I partake in different celebrations of this country when I know that this country also partakes in figuring out new ways to oppress me, right? And oppress everyone else that is around me that looks like me, right? So how do I negotiate celebrations? How do I negotiate interactions? How do I negotiate total institutions, which I define as education is a total institution. We all know that the criminal justice system is a total institution. We all know that housing is a total institution. We all know that even the food chain is a total institution, right? Like we live in a country that just is built on total institutions that are designed to give access to some and take access away from others. And others are usually Black folks first, right? And then we usually stay without the access until we fight for getting it or we decide to do it ourselves. And I want to start mobilizing into an effort of being self-sustainable, because I feel like that is the only way that we are truly going to survive. If we continue to need to survive based on other people allowing us access to things that we have created and continue to grow, we're always at the mercy of someone else taking it away from us, right? And so when we start to think about how can we as a group start creating different access points for each other out in ourselves as well, then we will be able to start moving in a better way. And so I'm really interested in exploring that. This is Tasemere, your host of the Blackout Live from New York. I will be back here next week. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send them over in the chat. In the comments at the bottom of this video. I am very, very excited about our next topic, which I don't know what it is yet, but I'm sure I will come up with something for next week, Saturday at 10 a.m. So looking forward to connecting with you guys then. Until then, be well and be safe.